The history of the British Empire. The rise of an island kingdom. If you were to look at a map of the modern world, the United Kingdom might seem like a relatively small country tucked away on the northwestern edge of Europe. Yet scattered across the oceans are islands, military bases, and territories that still remain under British sovereignty. They are quiet reminders of an era when Britain stood at the center of the largest empire the world had ever known. At its greatest extent during the early 20th century, the British Empire governed nearly a quarter of the Earth's land surface and influenced the lives of hundreds of millions of people across every inhabited continent. From the forests of Canada to the deserts of Africa, from bustling ports in Asia to remote islands in the Pacific, British ships, merchants, soldiers, and administrators built a global network unlike anything that had existed before. Its reach transformed international trade, spread the English language across the world, introduced new political systems, and connected distant societies through commerce and communication. At the same time, its expansion was accompanied by wars, conquest, economic exploitation, and profound cultural change. The empire brought technological progress to some regions while leaving lasting scars in others, creating a legacy that remains debated even today. But the story of this empire does not begin with vast fleets crossing the oceans or armies marching through foreign lands. It begins on a group of islands where rival kingdoms struggled for survival. For centuries, the British Isles were divided among competing rulers. England gradually emerged as the strongest kingdom through military victories, economic growth, and political stability. To the west lay Wales, which was eventually incorporated into the English crown, while Ireland became the focus of repeated military campaigns and settlement projects. North of England stood Scotland, an independent kingdom that fiercely defended its sovereignty despite centuries of conflict with its southern neighbor. Throughout the medieval period, England's ambitions rarely extended beyond nearby France and the surrounding seas. English kings invested enormous resources in European wars, believing that their future depended more on the continent than on distant oceans. Exploration beyond Europe remained limited, and the kingdoms of Spain and Portugal appeared far better positioned to dominate the newly discovered lands across the Atlantic. Everything began to change during the late 15th and early 16th centuries. Advances in shipbuilding, navigation, and cartography made longer voyages increasingly practical. European merchants dreamed of reaching the lucrative markets of Asia without relying on traditional overland routes controlled by rival powers. Spices, silk, porcelain, precious metals, and exotic goods promised unimaginable wealth for anyone capable of establishing reliable trade connections. England entered this competition later than many of its rivals. While Spain accumulated enormous riches from the Americas and Portugal established trading stations stretching from Africa to India, English merchants watched with growing interest. Rather than immediately building a vast overseas empire, England initially focused on encouraging private expeditions. Wealthy investors financed voyages, while experienced captains searched for new commercial opportunities, unexplored coastlines, and alternative routes to Asia. Some expeditions returned with valuable information. Others disappeared completely. Many failed because of harsh weather, disease, or simple lack of preparation. Yet each voyage expanded England's geographical knowledge and strengthened the belief that the oceans offered opportunities impossible to find within Europe alone. At the same time, powerful trading organizations began to emerge. Instead of relying entirely on royal funding, groups of merchants pooled their resources to finance risky overseas ventures. Investors shared both the profits and the dangers, allowing increasingly ambitious expeditions to be organized. These companies would eventually become some of the most influential commercial institutions in history, combining private enterprise with political influence in ways few could have imagined. As England's maritime experience grew, so did its naval strength. The English crown recognized that successful trade depended upon secure sea routes. Shipyards expanded, new warships were commissioned, and experienced sailors gained invaluable knowledge navigating distant waters. Pirates, privateers, and naval officers often operated within the same world, blurring the lines between commerce and warfare. Competition at sea became fierce as European powers fought to protect their merchants while disrupting those of their rivals. Religion also played an important role in shaping England's future. The Protestant Reformation altered alliances across Europe, placing England in direct competition with powerful Catholic monarchies. Political conflicts increasingly overlapped with religious divisions, encouraging English leaders to search for opportunities beyond the continent where new settlements could strengthen both their economy and strategic position. During the closing years of the 16th century, England achieved one of its greatest psychological victories. The defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588 demonstrated that Spain's naval dominance could be challenged. Although Spain remained a formidable empire, England gained confidence in its growing maritime capabilities. The victory inspired merchants, explorers, and politicians alike, reinforcing the belief that England could compete for influence on the world's oceans. The following decades witnessed the first serious attempts to establish permanent overseas settlements. Not every colony survived. Some suffered from starvation. Others collapsed because of disease or poor planning. Yet each failure provided valuable lessons that future colonists would use to build stronger and more sustainable communities. Gradually, England shifted from occasional exploration to organized expansion. Merchants sought new markets. Farmers looked for land. Religious groups searched for freedom. Investors pursued profits. The Crown hoped to increase both its prestige and its revenues. Together, these different motivations created a powerful momentum that would reshape global history. No one living at the beginning of the 17th century could have imagined how far this process would eventually go. What started as scattered trading ventures and fragile coastal settlements would, over the next 3 centuries, evolve into a worldwide empire connected by thousands of ships, protected by an unrivaled navy, and sustained by trade flowing between every corner of the globe. The rise of the British Empire was neither quick nor inevitable. It was built through ambition, innovation, competition, and extraordinary determination. It survived wars against Europe's greatest powers, economic crises, political revolutions, and challenges from rival empires. It adapted repeatedly to changing circumstances while constantly seeking new opportunities overseas. The age of empire had begun. And for Britain, the world would never be the same again. England's path toward overseas expansion. Long before Britain became the center of a global empire, England was simply one of several competing kingdoms in Western Europe. It possessed fertile farmland, growing market towns, and an increasingly organized government, but it lacked the immense wealth and overseas possessions enjoyed by Spain or Portugal. During much of the Middle Ages, English rulers focused almost entirely on affairs much closer to home. Their greatest concern was France. For generations, English monarchs fought costly wars across the English Channel in an attempt to defend or reclaim territories inherited from earlier dynasties. The Hundred Years' War consumed enormous financial and military resources, shaping England's political institutions and strengthening the authority of the crown. Although England ultimately lost nearly all of its continental possessions, the conflict produced a stronger sense of national identity that would influence future generations. While England looked toward Europe, dramatic events were unfolding elsewhere. The discovery of sea routes around Africa and across the Atlantic transformed global commerce. Portuguese sailors established trading posts along the African coast before reaching India by sea, opening direct access to valuable spices and luxury goods. Meanwhile, Spanish expeditions across the Atlantic uncovered entirely new continents rich in silver, gold, and agricultural resources. England watched these developments with growing interest. The enormous wealth flowing into Iberian ports demonstrated that maritime exploration could change the balance of power between nations. Yet England lacked both the financial resources and the naval experience needed to compete immediately. Instead of launching massive state-sponsored expeditions, English rulers encouraged private merchants and experienced captains to explore new opportunities. These early voyages were often uncertain ventures. Ships sailed into waters that appeared almost empty on European maps. Storms, unfamiliar currents, poor navigation, and shortages of fresh food frequently turned expeditions into desperate struggles for survival. Crews endured months at sea with little certainty that they would ever return home. Despite these dangers, exploration continued. Merchants believed that even a single successful voyage could generate extraordinary profits. Investors pooled their money together, sharing the risks while hoping for remarkable rewards. This partnership between private capital and royal support would eventually become one of England's greatest advantages over many of its competitors. At the same time, England itself was changing. Population growth increased pressure on farmland, encouraging many families to search for opportunities elsewhere. Expanding cities created larger markets for imported goods, while improvements in agriculture produced greater economic stability. A growing merchant class gained influence within English society and increasingly viewed overseas trade as the key to future prosperity. Religion added another powerful motivation. Following the English Reformation, conflicts between Catholics and Protestants affected nearly every aspect of public life. Some communities hoped that overseas settlements would provide greater religious freedom, while others believed that colonies could strengthen Protestant influence against Catholic Europe. Political, economic, and religious ambitions became closely connected, each reinforcing the desire for expansion. By the late 16th century, England's navy had also undergone significant improvements. New ship designs combined speed with powerful artillery, allowing English vessels to travel farther while defending themselves against hostile fleets. Experienced captains gained valuable knowledge navigating unfamiliar coastlines and ocean currents. Maritime skill became one of England's greatest national assets. Competition with Spain intensified throughout this period. Spanish treasure fleets carried enormous quantities of silver from the Americas back to Europe, making them attractive targets for English privateers operating with royal approval. Although these raids were technically acts of piracy from the Spanish perspective, they weakened Spain's economic strength while enriching English investors and sailors. One of the defining moments came with the defeat of the Spanish Armada. Spain had assembled one of the largest naval forces ever seen in Europe, intending to invade England and restore Catholic rule. Instead, a combination of English naval tactics, poor Spanish coordination, and severe storms scattered the invading fleet. While the victory did not immediately establish English dominance at sea, it greatly increased national confidence and demonstrated that Spain was no longer invincible. Following this success, English attention increasingly shifted westward rather than focusing solely on exploration. Merchants and political leaders began discussing permanent settlements overseas. Colonies offered more than strategic outposts; they could produce valuable raw materials, provide new markets for English goods, and strengthen England's position against rival European empires. The earliest settlements faced enormous difficulties. Many colonists arrived with unrealistic expectations, believing that riches would be easily found. Instead, they encountered unfamiliar climates, limited food supplies, disease, and difficult relations with indigenous peoples. Some settlements disappeared entirely within only a few years. Yet failure did not discourage further attempts. Each expedition returned with better maps, greater knowledge of local conditions, and practical experience that future colonists could apply. Investors accepted occasional losses because the potential rewards remained enormous. At the same time, new commercial organizations transformed England's approach to overseas expansion. Instead of relying solely on royal financing, powerful trading companies received charters granting them exclusive rights to conduct commerce in specific regions. These companies could establish trading stations, negotiate agreements with local rulers, build defensive forts, and in some cases even raise their own armed forces. This innovative system allowed England to expand its global presence without placing the entire financial burden on the government. Private investors assumed much of the risk, while the Crown benefited from increased customs revenue, stronger international influence, and growing access to foreign markets. England's merchants soon developed commercial networks stretching from the Baltic Sea to the eastern Mediterranean. Timber, iron, textiles, wine, spices, sugar, and countless other goods flowed through English ports. London rapidly emerged as one of Europe's most important trading centers, attracting merchants from across the continent. Economic success fueled naval expansion. More trade required more ships. More ships required better ports, experienced sailors, skilled shipbuilders, and stronger naval protection. Each improvement encouraged further overseas activity, creating a cycle of continuous growth that steadily increased England's influence far beyond Europe. By the beginning of the 17th century, England stood at a turning point. It remained much smaller than the great continental empires, but its maritime ambitions were expanding rapidly. Its merchants possessed growing financial resources, its navy had earned international respect, and its political leaders increasingly recognized that future prosperity would depend upon controlling trade rather than territory in Europe alone. The foundations of empire had now been laid. The next challenge would be transforming scattered trading ventures into permanent colonies, communities that would eventually become the building blocks of one of history's greatest global empires.